Radio Free Skaro!
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Radio Free Skaro, episode number 1021. I am Stephen in Edmonton.
Morning, Vancouver.
And Chris in Edmonton.
On this podcast, we say hello to a couple old friends of ours who haven't been on this show in 10 years, possibly even more so, perhaps. Neil Perryman, John Williams of the wonderful new podcast World of Telly, where they talk about old Telly and some new Telly, too. They talked about Andor as well, but anyway. It's just an excuse to have them on again and talk about old television and regional TV in the UK in the 70s and 80s and all that sort of old stuff that's people of a certain vintage.
Us
Quite enjoy. A lot of fun. John Williams was on the last time, I believe. Still, maybe. I know he was on when he talked about Innes Lloyd, when we talked about the producers of Doctor Who back in the 50th anniversary, when we did producer miniscopes way back when the universe was less than half its present size. That's how long ago that was. But we're here to talk about some Doctor Who stuff that's been happening, and Glastonbury stuff too, apparently, which is the best place to see a Doctor Who if you're going to be anywhere in the UK these days. But
well, it makes me my brain goes back to 2010 when Matt Smith was on stage with Orbital.
Was it 2010 or was it 2011?
2010.
It was 2010, right after his first season. Wow.
Just after his first series wrapped up, yeah.
Wow. Well, hell, I mean, we're there. Let's start there, just because just as we're going to hit record, Neil Shutigawa introduced Jade at Glastonbury. After a day after the internet was flooded with awesome videos of the coolest man alive, Peter Capaldi, actually performing "Take Me Out" with Franz Ferdinand at Glastonbury, looking sharp as a mofo, might I say, as well. What an
Capaldi?
icon!
Oh God, yeah.
Yeah,
that was the first thing that caught my eyes. So, for those who haven't seen it yet, he's basically wearing like a blood red shirt and trainers or shoes, and a jet black trousers and suit jacket, and he just looks so sharp, and sunglasses.
Yeah.
How do we know it's not the Doctor doing it?
Maybe it is. Maybe they were actually just shooting like a Doctor.
No, I mean the actual real Doctor just popped in, did a Franz Ferdinand thing.
Well,
I think. I was going to say, I think this is an indication that we're going to get that Billy Piper fake out, and Capaldi is coming back as the next Doctor.
Don't threaten me with a great time, damn it. Although in the back, they even had it planned out, because on the big screen behind him, you could see Peter Capaldi on there and everything, which is pretty cool. He got a massive head because he's Peter Capaldi, and of course he's a musician as well, so he sings, and yeah. Peter Capaldi, man. I did a bit of a deep dive, oddly enough, on YouTube earlier this week before this whole Franz Ferdinand thing came about. Looking at, I specifically found his appearance on Crown Court, probably like in 1982 or 83, towards the end of Crown Court, and I think there was another thing from another movie or something or other. Anyway, Peter Capaldi. I think he's my favorite Doctor, just so you know. I think I'm really leaning towards
it's
that.
never come up before.
No, I know, but you know what? Like, after you just let it sit for a while and think, okay, now that's a bold statement to make, having, come through childhood and everywhere else thinking Tom Baker and then Peter, then it's okay, you know what? I love them all, but you know what? I love them all, but I love some more than others. That's kind of how it is.
No, T. Bakes is still the MVP, and he always will be.
He still is, yeah, still there. Peter Capaldi, man. Peter Capaldi. Maybe Billy Piper's your favorite Doctor. Maybe... we
have yet to see her as a Doctor. She's my favorite moment.
Yes. Favorite Rose. Played Rose.
Out of two of them, yes.
Sorry, yes, and Vinny. But apparently the BBC had to issue a statement because they've received complaints about how they covered the news that Ncuti Gatwa regenerated into Billy Piper as he leaves Doctor Who.
Yeah.
They posted that.
Well, that's how just the timing of what was done, because they put stuff up on on the web, like basically right after the episode finished airing, and saw the BBC complaint website the other day and didn't think too much about it at the time, and then other places started running with the story, like Deadline and Radio Times and whatever. So I'm like, okay, so maybe we should talk about this. So we are talking about this, but basically, yeah, the people say they were spoiled because of how quickly the BBC put stuff up after the episode had aired.
How much of this is studios? Because Marvel did the same thing with Thunderbolts and naming them the New Avengers, like literally 3 days after the movie comes out. How much of them is them trying to get ahead of other people spoiling, so they are the ones to spoil it? You know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah. Like I still remember when was it Fugitive of the Jadoon? I think it was went out like right after the UK broadcast. John Perryman took to Twitter and started talking about his return and all that. And some people complained about him spoiling things. And I don't know. I mean, bring on the hate mail if need be. But I've always we've had these discussions for at least since 2011.
Right.
Well, Tom Baker spoiled himself for the Day of the Doctor.
Yeah, we just
didn't believe him. A day early.
Yeah, I know. We just said, "Oh, that's Tom being Tom." Oh my God.
I didn't believe it, and then he shows up, and I was like,
But I've always been of the opinion that once it's done airing in the UK, it is totally fair game worldwide because it's out there at that point. It's the information is in the hands of the public.
Although I don't know now in this day and age of streaming. I don't know if it should be, like it's not like
it is.
I know
that's the viewer is it's incumbent upon the viewer to avoid those things. Like, so for example, this week, 2 days ago or yesterday, yesterday, as we record this, the last chunk of Squid Games.
I was going to mention that. Okay, don't mention the thing. But yeah, I was going to
huge show. I haven't watched it yet. I will get to it when I can get to it.
Right.
But if I see spoilers out there, if people post spoilers and I see them, that's my fault. That's not the fault of the person posting the thing. Millions of people have already seen it. I haven't. So like. That's just, I don't know if it's ego or if it's selfishness or what it is, but it's just it's not their fault. The BBC is not in the wrong here whatsoever.
No, I suppose you're right. I'm also really, I mean, this is kind of takes it back to Doctor Who is a very easily spoiled show in many cases because spoil Andor. How can you spoil Andor when you're just sort of talking about plot developments and storylines, whereas shock appearances is kind of what has been Doctor Who's bailiwick in the last couple of years, certainly. And it's easy just to say Billy Piper is Doctor Who. Boom, you've just spoiled an entire episode of Doctor Who. It's easy to spoil, is what I mean to say.
Well, you're spoiling that. You're spoiling that reveal. You're not spoiling the episode.
Well. The reveal did spoil the episode, maybe.
But you talk about Andor, for example. Like, what are you going to do? Spoil it by saying, "Oh, have you seen A New Hope?" Like,
right.
The stuff has been out there for
Darth Vader is what?
50 years. Yeah,
I know. But there's a whole bunch of characters, of course, that you see in Andor that you don't see in Rogue One. They're going, whoa, what?
My favorite interpretation of that is they list off the people who aren't dead, and they're like watching the throne room speech in the back, getting drunk, going, "What is this? We spent 2 years, and this farm kid, and this other guy, and this hoodlum. What's the deal? And this furry dude? Right. What is this?"
To your jokes, Warren, there was an interview in 1978, 9. Whatever it was, with Mark Hamill, talking about, he literally said basically the words, "Darth Vader is my father. We'll find that out in the next movie."
Oh, wow. But the thing is, there was no internet. What are you going to do? Get on a party line on a phone and tell people? Like, it's just, if you missed that in a newspaper, like they put out the novelization of Star Wars, I think a month ahead of, I think I might have read it before I saw the movie and never connected the two in my head because I was a little kid.
Yeah.
In 1989, I was, as I know you were as well, Warren, greatly anticipating the release of Batman.
Yeah, and I was disappointed at the time.
And I bought and read the novelization of the movie before the movie came out.
Well, the story of Batman is pretty thin gruel to begin with. But now I say all that, and I loved Batman Returns because it was proper Tim Burton and not this half arsed John Peters version of Batman.
Studios, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, that's a nearly 40-year-old gripe, so who cares?
Right.
I think you said it a moment ago, Warren. Whoever said the internet, the words "the internet." That's the difference.
Yeah, that is absolutely. That's the gas fire.
The information can get out and around so much more quickly now than
along with
80s,
false
90s,
information,
whatever.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, false information, granted, yeah, but I don't know. I thought very little of this because basically, like, the BBC's response is, some people said that the headline gave away the ending, spoiling this, whatever. We will, try to. We'll try to do better. We'll try to. We will be mindful of your views for future coverage. Is the exact wording.
Yeah.
I'm sorry you were offended. Is what that is.
Yeah, like it's a non-apology, and that's good because they don't need to apologize in my books.
Yeah. Well, they did though. They did a thing.
Well, this is a controversy we'll forget about in a week. So yeah.
I've already forgotten.
Yeah,
about it.
well, that's just that the news cycle goes so fast as well. That
we were saying before we recorded, I said I can't even remember the atrocities that Trump pulled off yesterday. They're pretty big ones, and I just can't remember them anymore because some new ones are coming probably.
Probably down the pipe, yeah. Although saying such might ban you from getting on a plane, Warren. So,
well, add it to the list.
Yeah. Add it to the list of horrible things. Peter Davison, by the way, remember him? Doctor Who number 5, of course, and only number 5, even though he's come back to do things. Anyway, there's a big interview, 80-minute interview on YouTube about his whole career and stuff that I have yet to get into, but it's Peter Davison, so I will. But he said basically somebody quoted a thing that said. Quote from that interview on current Doctor Who. This is Peter Davison's thoughts on it. It's like watching a trailer for a Doctor Who show you'd like to watch later. There are huge gaps in the narrative. They're just leaping onto the next bit and hoping your brain fills in the rest. Thinking, I think it's pretty similar to what I've said. So I'm glad me and Doctor Who number 5 see eye to eye on this.
How much of that, I wonder, though, is just the nature of how TV is, or how TV stories are shown, made, whatever, these days.
I don't know.
Versus the 80s.
I mean,
go ahead. In general, the pace is like, think back to, speaking of Matt Smith, at the time, Moffat was writing the scripts to a particular length, but Smith would deliver his lines so quickly that everything ran short.
Yeah, that's true.
So that's just how that was delivered. That's in the general sense, that's how TV is these days. And then on top of everything else, in his era, he's got 24 whatever episodes to work with to tell stories versus 8, 9.
Well, is it we just watched, I don't watch many new TV shows, but we just Eric and I just watched finished over the last week Department Q. It's a Netflix show set in Scotland. Therefore, it's better than your average Netflix show. But it was still 9 episodes.
Depth Q.
Depth Q, if you want to call it by its actual on-screen title. And, I mostly wanted to keep watching it because we paused for after about 4 or 5 episodes for a few days because it was during playoffs and stuff. And we picked it up again, and I had no memory of anything about. Actually, we were watching that and Slow Horses finally concurrently, and I said, "Wait a second, is he?" I literally got characters confused in between the two shows. So I said, "We better finish one before I move on to the next." And as we were done Department Q, I liked it enough, but I was like, there are some real slow bits. Why is this 9 episodes? And not all TV, honestly, people think that TV is quicker paced now. It's kind of like the same kind of mentality, honestly, that went into the War Games in color, the Daleks in color. We got to make this quicker pace. If anything, TV is slower paced now. So to watch Disney Doctor Who, skip over the plot beats like that, which I often complained about over this past season. It's kind of going against the grain of actually how modern TV is produced. We're not limited to a clock anymore per se as much since it's on streaming, but it's also not because it's also on BBC One, but it's on streaming, but it's on BBC One. And so I think often the pacing issue, I think, I almost feel like it's I don't know about a lack of confidence, but it's people are going to be bored by this. We got to move on. We got to lose, chop only the important bits and just lose all the character bits just to keep the story going. And
what's the BBC One average viewing age these days? 93, 94?
About that, yeah.
Well, but I mean, even previous iterations like Moffat for sure, but even Chibnall, stuff just felt more dense, and this doesn't feel as it's like you see a person in an expensive car and you're like, I bet you that's a really vapid conversation, but it looks really good, that car they're driving in. Right. So that's kind of how I feel about, that's not entirely how I feel about new R2D2, but there is that vapidity to it that there isn't to the previous ones, including R2D1.
I don't know if this is me trying to defend RTD's writing or what. Maybe it is. But there's also editing to consider. There's executive decisions. Like Stephen, you've become a bit of a fan about talking about how Phil Collinson has put his stamp on things by changing things in a very particular, consistent manner. So I mean, it's not just the story. There's all the other. BBC is going to have, there's BBC Studios will have their notes. We know that at least in one instance for Ruby Road, Disney had some notes.
Mm-hmm. Probably one note. Where's Doctor Who? Basically, going in there, everyone should be wondering where Poochie is, and so they had to make a whole new scene with Poochie.
It's important, the Poochie imperative.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's not just what we see on the screen. It's there are a bajillion decisions that go into what we see on the screen.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, Peter Davison has always had sort of an eye for how TV is made, like even back in when he was Doctor Who. Well before he was interested in directing stuff, like, the Five-ish Doctors sort of was the culmination of that impulse, I guess you could call it. But he's always sort of had an eye for such things. So I'm it's not just old man yells at cloud. No, because I think
he consistently works. So he's seeing the progression of how this goes. So
yeah, that's true. Actually, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
This is an industry in general.
Mm-hmm. Anyway, the full interview is in the show notes, and I'll be watching that because I'm intrigued to see what Peter Davison. One of my favorite doctors of all time, just like all the others, says about the current state of Doctor Who. So, what else is happening here in this week of no Doctor Who? But we have tons of things on the news list. There's a new Doctor Who magazine special coming out, special number 7, 70 special issues. It's about the horror, the horror issue coming in September 24th. All about scary stuff in Doctor Who.
Colt Bucks picked the right picture. Skeleton Master is what I'm saying.
That's true. Although the cover, apparently.
I love him.
Although the cover's not final, but there's Zygon on there, but they might come up with something different by the time it comes out. I think Doctor Who should lean into horror more, quite frankly. I like it when it goes
it's
scary.
very good at
Why
it.
not?
So, yeah.
Yeah, let's get more space babies.
Yeah, like the other, the other one.
Coming.
I mean, Waters of Mars, which is also what. Hyde was great. Waters of Mars.
Image of the Fendahl is horror, and it's fantastic.
Fendahl. Like, what else is it? I mean, honestly, Nightmare of our Haunting of Villa Diodati is one of my favorite Doctor Who stories of all time. That was really well done. So
what's the one with the Mother Made of Wood, which isn't as good, but it's still decent.
Knock,
yeah.
Yeah, like Diodati even has like a very full-on proper horror trope with Graham seeing the mother and daughter ghosts that nobody else saw.
That was cool. Unexplained, but cool.
What that was the fun of it. That was the fun of it. Mm-hmm. What a great episode of Doctor Who. Anyway, maybe that'll be mentioned in this Doctor Who magazine special coming out in September from Doctor Who magazine. Also, if you want to read things, there's an exclusive preview of Doctor and Ruby's Lucky Day adventure, Night of the Shriek. That's in the Doctor Who annual coming out sometime later this year in August.
September, I want to say?
August 2026. But Pete McTighe has written a short story. Basically, the story that you see Conrad eavesdropping on between the Doctor and Ruby is basically written into a short, been Rogue One, if you will, into
do never compare a Lucky Day and Andor ever again.
It's right there. 2 peas in a pod, positively 2 peas in a pod. You can read that. Links in the show notes as well. Okay. Now this is a paid political broadcast, and it is time now to hand
Burgess
over
party.
the reins to Chris Burgess, who wishes to speak to you on a topic of great importance regarding the North American release of the War Games in Color, which just happened this past week. Chris Burgess, over to you.
I think important is a dramatic overstatement. So yeah, we got the Blu-ray for the War Games in Color in North America this past week.
Yeah.
And man, I haven't cracked the plastic yet.
What? You haven't cracked the plastic yet?
I have. I actually have, because I got it too.
You watched it.
I don't know
if you noticed this, Chris. You might not have seen this, but there's a Radio Free Skaro extra on that
first thing I listened to
Blu-ray. Where I don't know if you saw that. Yeah, there is.
I don't know how I would know that considering the packaging.
No, I know. That's true.
That's kind of the crux of your editorial. Yeah.
Well, that's part of it. So I don't know. This is. I feel free to fast forward a couple of minutes here for anyone who doesn't want to listen to this, okay. Which is probably most people, but I don't know. Whatever. No, this is me venting as much as anything else. Like the Blu-ray, we waited for however many months between the UK and this release, and these days in Canada, it is distinctly hard to buy Doctor Who DVDs in the first place. Like our choices are basically Amazon and the BBC shop, and the BBC shop has been basically abandoned.
Yeah, hasn't been updated in months. Months.
Maybe even pushing a year at this point. I don't know. But anyway, it's not getting the TLC that it could or possibly should. So basically, Amazon is like the only outlet. So Amazon complaints aside, as we say. As we talk about this on the day of Jeff Bezos' wedding.
$50 million wedding in Venice, yeah.
Disgusting. No, thank you.
Yep.
Nothing says Bond villain like that, but yeah.
So, as a result, we are completely over a barrel as to whatever they want to choose to charge. So they are charging $40 for this release, which, I mean, some stuff is you can buy. After they've been out for a while, and once they go on sale, there have been a number, like in the double digits, of the classic series Blu-ray collections that have been less expensive than this.
Yeah.
And so we have one option, and we have to pay the $40 if we want this. And then what do we get? We get one disc inside the damn box. The UK version, which Stephen, you have a copy of, because
I got it in my hands right now. Yeah,
got it in your hands, so you can confirm that one is 4 discs.
4 discs
to our 1 disc.
Yeah.
To be fair, 3 of those discs are the original episodes of the War Games.
Yeah, the original DVD release, straight up reproduced on different colored discs. Yeah.
Yeah. So whether it was 1 disc, 3 discs, whatever, we get War Games in Color with the extra 6 minutes of footage and the extras, and that's all. We don't get the original 10 episodes. And really, how hard is it to include those discs? How much does it cost? Like, okay, I can understand from like a shipping perspective that's going to add some weight. Okay, whatever. Right. You're not changing the dimensions of the packaging, you are changing the weight. So okay, fine, that's going to cost more money in the end, but it's really trivial to put these 10 episodes in the package, and we don't get them. And then on the back of the package, there is a fair amount of stuff on there, including apparently there's an RFS thing on there.
There
Stephen,
is.
I don't know if you knew
well, that's why it costs $40. We do not come cheap.
Right.
We had extra 10 easily. Yes.
Yeah.
How much is that per minute?
So there's whatever litany of special features. So on the back of the stupid label, where there is not a shortage of space, it just says includes loads of bonus features.
Right.
Like, you have room. How about listing some of what's on there?
Well, let me compare and contrast that to the UK version. On the UK version, in that exact same space, it says includes bonus features and the War Games original black and white episodes. That's all it says. Doesn't actually list what those features are.
Okay, so we're getting the same thing as the UK version in that case.
Pretty much.
So in that event, why couldn't both releases have had some information? It doesn't have to be a complete exhaustive list.
Right.
I've got I've got a bunch of like recent 4K Blu-rays that do list every last thing, because the way it often works for 4K releases is you get 2 discs in the package. You get the 4K movie, which is going to have maybe a commentary track, but usually little, if anything, for special features. And then you get a second disc, which is the Blu-ray of the standard Blu-ray of the movie, and all the special features are on there. So as a result, quite often, as you can imagine, a lot of these releases have a lot of special features. So you look at the back of the packaging, and it lists everything there in an utterly tiny, unreadable typeface size.
Yeah. Yes.
Like, I realize that you can absolutely go way too far in the other direction, but there's nothing saying they couldn't have had, like, includes blah 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 and more, or something like that.
What I find amusing, and I'm wondering if this is a late change, is the on the UK version it says 4 discs, about the little PG rating there. The rather amusing and somewhat cruel thing that it says on the front of the North American release, it says 1 disc set. And I wonder if maybe they wanted to include the original release of the War Games up until very late after the cover had been made, and can he make that 4 into a 1 and just keep that little thing on there? Because 1 disc set is like, it reminds me of Life of Rock with Brian Pern, whereas and then I had a big hit with that. It stayed at the top of the charts for 1 consecutive week, and that's kind of what I was thinking when I saw 1 disc set. Although I will say that the actual physical case between the North American and the UK version is slightly thicker, because it has to have 4 discs in there. So it takes up relatively the same amount of space on the shelf, but it's tiny bit thicker.
Gatefold or whatever they call it.
Yeah, exactly. So
yeah.
Would this is a complaint across all the wonderful collection Blu-rays that we get are superb, but only the first one, the Tom Baker season 12 one, had the booklet inside, and none since in North America have had the booklet. Not even as a PDF. They had a PDF version of that book on the first one as part of the Blu-ray. If you had a Blu-ray drive, you could download it. I would appreciate even those PDFs being included on those ranges, because many times, because so many times I've gone into like season 7, for instance, like, where is that Ines Lloyd documentary? I popped in every day. Oh, there it is. It's on this one for some. I would have expected, maybe it'll be on the I don't know, not the Ines Lloyd one, one of the Nicholas Courtney ones or something like that. Like, it's going to be on Spearhead because it's only 4 episodes. Maybe it'll be on no, it's not on there. It's on another one. So
I've been using the Doctor Who's DVD special features wiki thing to keep on top of that, because not only will it tell me what disc a particular thing is on, it'll also say which ones are new versus which ones were on the prior DVD release. Oh
yeah, well, Paul Smith of Wonderful Wonderful Books has a wonderful
DVD compendium,
classic DVD, which is free for download, but I don't think it's been updated to include the Blu-rays. But that used to be a invaluable source of everything.
Great resource.
Yeah, wonderfulbooks.co.uk, I think it is.
Yeah, so I mean, the thing I meant to say at the very outset of all this is, I know this is a massive first world problem.
Yep.
But I don't care. It's still my $40, and I chose to spend it this way, and I feel a little disappointed. And not unlike the season 1 Shudigawa season 1 Blu-ray, which also dropped.
Yeah,
which should have been 4K in North America on this past Tuesday as well, and on the back of it includes more than 6 hours of additional material, including Doctor Who Unleashed episodes and other special features. That is better. That is at least a little bit of something. It doesn't help that directly. So there's a series of still frames from the episode, from the various episodes, and that text is below the photos, but directly above the photos, alongside Doctor Who Unleashed episodes and exclusive special features. So they also say the same thing twice, which is a waste of space as well.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know who's approving these things, but I'm sorry.
Okay, fired for that blunder.
Yeah.
There's room for improvement, shall we say?
I suppose so. Yeah, I mean, let's face it. There's basically three different. I think there's three different. I don't think Russell Minton had anything to do with the war games. Like that sort of end is a BBC thing. The obviously the Ncuti Gatwa series we got was probably BBC/Disney, I guess, because it's coming on a Disney. Like I don't have the UK version of it to compare to. Plus, it came out in Steelbook, but I don't know how different that one is. And then there's a collection Blu-ray as well. You know, there's like three different strains in a way of. Or I wonder if like the War Games, for instance, is kind of like part of the like the animated releases, that sort of thing. Is that separate to that? Like I'm curious. I'm given how many deep dives and many conversations we've had with the people who make the Blu-rays and the collection sets. That's one thing we haven't quite worked out, is the hierarchy of how everything gets ported to other different Blu-ray releases on either side of the Atlantic Ocean. Mm-hmm. Kind of confusing.
Yeah. Well, I know back in the day for the DVD releases, everything was partnered with Warner for the North American stuff. And I don't know if there's anything like that for the more recent releases or not.
Don't know either. But I was actually surprised by the size of the Gatwa season 1. I was expecting a thin little Blu-ray like all the Whittaker releases were, but it was like it's basically the same size as one of your standard collection Blu-ray sets. So
yeah, well, given it's a 7-disc set, I would hope so.
Well,
but yeah.
Say that. Well, I did.
I wonder if the whole 1-disc set thing. I wonder if that has anything to do with like some template they don't want to deviate from, or
that's entirely possible. Yeah.
One job I had many years ago. Mm-hmm. Working in an office, the person I worked under was very, very particular about how. Not what was presented, not just what was presented, but how it was presented. Mm-hmm. So, for example, like choice of color use and whatever, and the psychology behind using color X versus color Y,
right?
Stuff like that. So that's always been in my brain since then. As to like how many there are definitely decisions being made based on things of that ilk.
Mm-hmm. Here's another example. Like when I would work for a newspaper and then later a news site, we would say, minister of whatever, like infrastructure. We would always not capitalize that. And now that I'm in a communications role, you have to capitalize all this stuff. And I cannot wrap my head around it because the certain, and in fact, AP and CP styles say this. These are the ways you're supposed to express these things, right? So I might be way off on that one. That might have been a house thing, but you get in that habit. So possibly somebody writing this template has just gotten in the habit, or it is the house style of whoever they're not just putting out these Doctor Who Blu-rays, they're putting out however many other different kinds of stuff too. Right.
Well, I just to focus on the other in color release that we've had in North America here, the Daleks in color, of course, came out.
Yes.
It had that same little cartouche on the bottom right there that actually says 2-disc set. So it does feel like there's a template for it, because of course the North American release of the Daleks in color included the original DVD release of the Daleks.
And that's there on the Ncuti Gatwa season 1 set as well. 7-disc set.
Interesting.
Same typeface, roughly the same size.
Yeah.
And,
could just be like a required way to say things. Who knows? Which has nothing to do with Doctor Who. It has more to do with some other department somewhere.
Yeah.
But also on the Daleks in color release in North America, albeit again on DVD, we got the original 7 episodes.
Yeah. Very odd.
Which we, again, do not get for the War Games. You also, for whatever it's worth as well, just one slight thing about the season 12 release. So obviously that was the first collection Blu-ray altogether. I believe it was still also in both the UK and North America. The only one to have replacement discs made available because of typos and errors and like closing credits and whatever the heck else. But there's two or three of the season 12 discs in North America. They were replacements available. They did not make it easy to find how to do it.
No, I still have my my duplicate copies now.
Yeah, I have both versions.
Yeah, I've got them. I've got them. They sent they sent 2 discs of like envelopes. Is basically how they did it. They didn't send a whole new set for me. It was just 2 separate discs. So
that's how I got mine. But I still have the like they didn't ask for the misprint discs to be returned or anything like that. So
no, because what would they do with them? They got enough coasters there, I guess.
I mean, in the grand scheme, like I said, first world problems. I'm not going to say differently.
Right.
And do I care a huge deal when I've got the War Games on DVD from back in the day? I mean, no, I can throw that in at will.
Right.
But not everybody will have it. There are going to be people who have now seen this colorized version and they're going to be like, ooh, maybe I want to go back and watch the original uncut version.
Right.
Cool. If you're in the UK,
figure out who that mysterious Mexican man is.
if you're in the UK, cool. iPlayer, there it is.
Yeah.
Outside of that, question mark.
Yeah, it kind of puts paid to RTD's thing of like, oh, kids will just watch it all on iPlayer anyway. So, well, outside of North America, RTD, we don't have that option, and this just hammers that point home. Of course we do because we're nerds, but we already have it. But for a new audience, though, you're right. For a new audience, it's
And what's the point of these color releases? To try to get a new audience.
Yeah. Very good point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, there was, some people might speculate, oh, does this mean season 6 down the pipeline? No, probably doesn't. Just because they wanted to save money, probably. Thought 3 extra discs on this set. No way. But we're still going to charge $40. Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's already written in stone, just like this thing on the front. So,
yeah, I mean, Amazon obviously, two big things there. Number one, they will often discount things below cost because they can afford to do so. They can do loss leaders. But number two, more importantly, they are paying a certain amount for this product. That's true. So they are basing their resale price on what they're paying for the wholesale price. That's just how things work for those who aren't aware. Yeah. So I get it. I get that this $40 price tag isn't necessarily something they wanted to do, more possibly that they needed to do, but it's also Jeff Bezos. It's Amazon. They could be just sheer greed for markup as well. I don't know.
Yeah, like who sets it and who sets the price for this? I imagine the actual retailer, not so much Amazon. Like the initial price, I imagine, comes from the distributor.
I assume the North American distributor rather than
Amazon,
rather than anyone in the UK.
The seller, yeah. Well, we'll see what happens when Amazon is making the next series of Doctor Who coming in 2027.
If that happens, sure.
Yeah. See what they do with it.
I don't know. At the end of the day, I mean, it's only been these 2 releases so far, and obviously there's chatter of what could be next, and a lot of the other lengthier stories either are already out, i.e. season 7 with its 3 7-parters,
right?
Or just aren't complete. So Master Plan or Evil or Power of the Daleks, things like those, which, were they complete, could be candidates for this shortened colorized version.
Right.
But,
I've heard they're actually going to do a 75% speed colorized remake of The Rescue is what they're going to do next.
That's exactly
lengthen it to 60 minutes so they could do it for. Yeah, it's going to look great. Coquillion is going to be amazing.
Oh, no, it's pronounced Coquitlam. Also, we just got to take a step back and say, and that's not to deride anything you just said, Chris, but just the fact that we're getting these ancient shows colorized and zhuzhed up is amazing to begin
with. Yeah.
If you're a fan of them, yeah. I mean, or if you're somebody who's like, where do I want to dip my toes into classic Doctor Who, or I can't see myself sitting through 10 episodes of a classic Doctor Who story. Hey, here's a 96-minute cut. Yeah, this looks a lot more appealing.
But it just speaks to how much appeal this show has after 60 years that they're willing to do this.
Oh God, yeah. We have said a billion times and or would happily say a billion more about just how effusive with praise and gratitude that we are of having these, well, not just everything on DVD, but all the VAM that was produced for all the DVDs, all the Blu-ray collections that we have, the massive amount of work that goes into the booklets that we don't get, or especially the PDF material of shooting scripts and
Richard Bignall's work is amazing on that.
Yeah, like his but on top of everything else, even the fact that all this stuff exists for us to get these digital copies of, because there was that was it on the season 7? Must have been on the season 7. The one looking for piece with Toby where he meets up with Bignall.
Malcolm Hook one, I think. Yeah. He meets up with Bignall in every single one because Bignall will often send him off to places, Yeah,
but I mean, but like meeting at a BBC Archives place, and like here's this massive file on the Celestial Toymaker, and here's this massive file.
Oh,
it was on the Savages.
Yeah,
it was on the Savages.
One,
That's the one.
Yeah.
The massive file folder of stuff on Celestial Toymaker, and but nothing on the Savages, sort of thing. But yeah, in general, like there have been these records and whatever that have been kept, and it's like from a fan perspective, like I think it's safe to say that no other show has ever gone to this extreme, especially given the breadth and amount of content there is to deal with.
Maybe Star Trek with them redoing their two separate series. That's the only thing that comes close.
Yeah.
But even then, I mean, Star Trek isn't getting the stuff like the newly
it's just the closest I can think
of.
Well. Yeah.
And Star Trek's got a similar problem to 60s Doctor Who insofar as a lot of people are dead. So making this newer stuff isn't that much harder.
Well, fortunately, they just keep remaking this show. So
we got another TOS remake probably in the works coming up. Great, just what we need, more of that. I love TOS, the original. Don't get me wrong.
All I have to ask though is, if Benjamin Cook and Rich Tipple and Kieran Hyman and co are thinking about doing another colorized re-edit of a 1960s episode, just let me know beforehand, so that I can find the film editor who maybe also worked on other shows that are missing. And then I can interview him and then casually mention if he has any other film reels.
Is that lightning in a strike twice, do you think?
Well, probably not.
I think at this point, the people responsible for these releases might proactively go out
maybe
and
that's what it is.
Try to find the crew members
although they didn't.
who might have such things.
Oh, man, I mean, Chris Hayden was sitting there for 50-odd years with a film reel sitting in his airplane hangar. I mean,
much like Frodo in the Ring for 50 years.
Just like Frodo in the Ring, it sat there. It wanted to be found. Exactly.
I don't know how this lasted as long as it did, but for anyone who did listen through it all, thank you.
Yeah, when you said 2 minutes, I said, come on. For
those who didn't listen, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Nothing to be sorry about.
We didn't even talk about the future of Doctor Who, and we're still 45 minutes into this episode. We'll have stories for years, everyone. There won't be Doctor Who on the screens for at least a couple years, and we will have no problem filling the air.
It's not a promise. That's a threat.
Yeah, it is very much a threat. Let's move on though. The next vinyl release. God, I wish I collected these. Classic Second Doctor Adventure, the Moon Base is coming to vinyl on September 19th. The discs are like blue. The color. Listen, I love that. Like they have a big thing here. They tell everything about the story and who directed it and who's in it and everything. And it just says, with a superb cover illustration depicting the Cybermen on the moon. Tell us who did these, because these are the best things.
Oh, they're great, yeah.
If dear listeners, if amongst you lot are the person or people who did the artwork for the Moon Base and any other Doctor Who vinyl cover, reach out and let us know, or someone else tell us, because these are spectacular art pieces.
This one, like, I know the story itself from the 60s, but this has a real like mid-70s sci-fi vibe to it, like with the rainbows and the colors and just the way it's done. It just looks like all the sci-fi art I would see as a kid in the 70s and watch my brain explode. Like it just looks so good.
Utterly gorgeous. Do not play these on your record player, because they are too gorgeous to play.
Or buy 2 copies. How about that?
Do buy 2 copies. They are just staggeringly beautiful. God, even the vinyl releases for Doctor Who gets better care than actual official DVD releases for other shows. I mean, these are gorgeous piece.
There's a lot of releases these days that are getting these funky colored records as well, which I'm here for that.
Yeah. God, it looks great. Anyway, like
that's because physical media is a niche, and that nothing more so than vinyl. So
that's true. Vinyl made a bit of a comeback, still going strong. I wonder if
VHS has even made a bit of a comeback, which I find funny.
There's
the odd person who will argue that the image quality is better, and I'm like, no, it's VHS.
Yeah,
the whole point is that it isn't. But
we had an email a few weeks ago from a listener who said, you know what, actually, because the person worked at a DVD and Blu-ray store in Florida, I think it was, and they said, you know what? It's actually sales have increased a great deal over the past few weeks and months.
Some indie horror films make a point of putting out a VHS edition because I know hardcore horror weirdos, myself included, can be into that.
Yeah. Yes, we did get an email like that, which was great because it was the genesis of that was, I think, me saying how physical releases are just, not as much of a thing, which is, relative to the height of DVD, for example. Yeah, that's definitely the case. But there's, I hope, I should say, that people are getting annoyed enough with streaming and things getting just unceremoniously dropped from service X, moving over to service Y, and I don't subscribe to that one. Oh, there's another $14 a month or whatever. I would rather just buy the darn thing and have it in perpetuity. And I mean, that's always like, I buy a lot of digital content. I also buy a lot of physical content. And I much prefer having the physical discs, even if I've digitized them and can watch them from that digital copy. I still want that physical disc because that way I don't have to subscribe to 18 different streaming services. And if I don't subscribe to the right one, I don't have to subscribe to that other one if something gets dropped from Crave, whatever.
There's an analogy for that with comic books. Like it used to be, there were a bunch of different interesting comic book readers. One of them was Comixology, and then Amazon bought Comixology, and it ruined it from what I can tell. It's all been kind of shunted into a Kindle where it doesn't really belong. And so a bunch of big time comic book nerds were like, well, this is terrible. And they've gone back to their old ways of maybe buying the physical comics, some of them because they're ethical, and then pirating essentially, or scanning it themselves and then putting it in a different reader because Comixology goes boom for no reason.
Sure. I mean, the same thing because at the end of the day, the sad reality is in a lot of licensing agreements and whatever, we as the users don't own anything. We have paid for the right to access whatever for as long as whatever chooses to let us have that access. And if the company goes under, or if something changes, whatever, we can lose that. We can lose that access, even though we've paid whatever $10 for that movie or whatever the case is.
Yeah. Or they'll edit it, or they'll change the thumbnail of it. Like my Lord of the Rings films have changed like 3 times since I bought them, and they're just like, "What? Why is the thumbnail different now? I bought this. Why is this?" Anyway, it's weird, but we'll always beat the drum for physical media here on this here podcast. Maybe we're old. Maybe we're sensible.
No, not maybe.
We are absolutely old.
Yeah.
Just looking at the Doctor Who.tv article for the Moonbase records here.
Right.
Has a list of places you can buy it from. I've just been looking at these various things, and annoyingly or unfortunately, they only have the same blurb to work with. Like there's no information on any of these sites about artwork or artist or whatever. I was hoping there might be someplace, but
no. Why are they hiding? What are they hiding from us? Damn it! Tell us who they are, because honestly, it should be
information must be out there.
It's got to be out there somewhere. Speak up, artists, because you do wonderful work, and we want to celebrate your work on this podcast. Some more stuff to get you through the day here. The Big Finish has another 8th Doctor Adventures story coming out, Causeway, in a brand new box set. Full cast audio drama coming November 2025. Timing with Paul McGann's birthday, November 14th, don't you know? Who teams up with India Fisher and Jay Griffiths, former Radio Free Skaro live show guest Jay Griffiths. And we don't have any artwork to critique, but there are.
She was charming.
She was lovely. Yeah. So there, and Paul McCann, of course, is quite charming as well. Coming to Gallifrey 1 in February. So there you go. That's coming in November. Hey, let's talk about climate change. Everyone loves that.
Hooray!
Alexander Devrient, who of course plays Colonel Ibrahim on the war between the land and the sea, which of course is the
Christopher Ibrahim.
Christopher Ibrahim. Oh, yeah. Is he named after you? Do you think?
Sure. No, of course not. Don't be absurd. No, nothing is named after me.
Anyway, he's a supporter of Green Rider, which is an actor-led movement that uses contractual and cultural influence to create a fairer and greener TV and film industry. And there's a bit of a profile about like what the Doctor Who production unit in Cardiff has done to basically minimize their carbon footprint, their environmental footprint, taking trains everywhere back and forth to, sharing cars, electric cars. There are no printed scripts. Everyone's got it on iPads or Microsoft iPads, as I like to call them.
Gross.
I remember on a football broadcast a couple years ago. Oh yeah, they use their Microsoft iPad for it. For the replays, little things like that. Bring their own water bottles, cutlery, of course, recyclable plates and cutlery and everything. But basically, the little things to just making a TV show, which can be very wasteful when it comes to
horses being painted to be cows and so forth.
Right, exactly. So it's a neat little insight into what what Doctor Who has done. I imagine a lot of other productions hopefully are doing as well. Because seeing all that scenery, like, okay, where's that scenery? Oh, we wrecked it. Oh, so it's probably destroyed somewhere in the bottom of a landfill. Well, maybe it's been reused or recycled or something. So,
yeah, there's a blurb in here talking about just even the differences between season 1 and season 2, and a reduction of the carbon footprint for season 2 being quite a bit lower, like the footprint being a lot lower than season 1. And then it says for the war between, they wanted to lower it again, especially because of the themes of the show itself, which makes sense. And I find the fact that they're putting things, the actors, and I'm sure crew members, whoever else, the fact they're putting things in their contracts to make this happen, I am really a fan of, just because you need some catalyst, and sure, why not that? Like if you're going to use, for lack of a better word, clout, use it for good, and there's nothing wrong with that in my mind. Like I saw a recent interview with Brad Pitt, for example, where he was talking about when they shot Seven. He had it in his contract that the ending we saw in the movie was actually the ending that happened when it got released. And he was saying how it's in his contract. Fincher shot it the way that it was shot, and then the notes started coming down from the studio, sort of thing, saying, "Can't we change it? Maybe put." Spoilers for those who haven't seen Seven, a 30-year-old movie. Can't we put like the dog's head inside the box?
That's
instead?
even worse.
Yeah,
stuff like that. There are people who would find that much worse. But no, Pitt stuck to his guns and was like, hey, you want any footage of me? This is what has to happen.
So on the rider,
what's in the box? You better do it right.
Yeah. Good stuff. I'm all for making such productions much more greener than they have. Every time I see an explosion go off in like Spirit from Space, then I see the production notes. Thinking, this uses a chemical which has been since banned from movies. That's like
the Three Doctors is just like toxic environment.
Oh yeah, just
not good.
Laced with asbestos or something like that. So.
Asbestos is making a comeback, don't you know?
More asbestos.
Great, wonderful, yeah.
But even things like just I think of like you talk about explosions in Spearhead from Space, for example. These days, a lot of that could also be done, digitally or whatever, where there aren't any harmful chemicals or anything like that. Also, probably much lower cost as well. Like back in the day, watching them. The DVD commentary for the original V miniseries.
Oh yes.
Which
is great. Still holds up.
Oh, I still love that miniseries so much. I even like the reboot with Marina Baccarin.
Never watched it.
But anyway, the Kenneth Johnson, the writer director, in his commentary, he was talking about like when they would do like little explosions on the ground from like laser fire, like ships shooting at the hitting the ground, whatever. He's like, yeah, they're like $1,000 a piece. So one to do every single one. So there was a series of explosions as part of the story, and he just sat there going, "That's $1,000. That's another $1,000. That's another $1,000.
That's a showrunner right there."
Of course, a great way to minimize your environmental footprint at this day and age when making a TV show is stop using AI to write your scripts, because AI takes a lot of computing power.
And the Trump administration is selling off land so they can put AI on it. Or data centers. Great, wonderful, isn't that lovely?
Wonderful. I'll tell you what is wonderful, though, Warren. Last bit in the news here. The Laundry role-playing game has a thing coming out. Warren, you've written for this. Tell us about it.
I sure have. Okay, so The Laundry, for those who don't know, Charles Stross wrote in his writing a series of books, and the idea behind The Laundry is math at a high enough level becomes magical, and so the spy agency basically hires under force hackers and other people with really great math skills to work in what amounts to kind of the Slow Horses version of a spy agency. It's kind of like it's half workplace comedy, half fighting elder gods and Cthulhu and all sorts of crazy stuff like that. And they're very good books. And I had read them all. And the guys who made this role-playing series, Cubicle 7 Games, are the guys who did the Doctor Who role-playing game. And I wrote for that too. Weirdly enough, this is publishing. So this comes out before the Doctor Who stuff I did. But yes, I wrote for it. So now there's 4 books: The Operative's Handbook, The Supervisor's Guide, which is like the sort of Dungeon Master Guide, Intro to Applied Occult Computing, which is an introductory adventure, another one called Black Bag Jobs, which is like older and newer adventures because this is a second edition. Anyway, if you want to read exclusively only the stuff I wrote, The Operative's Handbook has like a whole section, and it's all explaining what your different jobs are in the different parts of the agency. And so I wrote all that stuff, or most of it, I'm sure, not to take work away from everybody else. I haven't got the actual physical books, but you can order those. And you can order the PDFs. I got PDFs as a contributor copy. So it is really cool to open this thing and go to something you wrote in a Google Doc 2 years ago and go, oh, wait, there it is right there on paper, sort of on a PDF, but still.
Nifty. Well done, Warren.
Pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if you want to order it, if you're into that kind of stuff, cubicle7games.com.
Links in the show notes too. If you want to get it and play with your friends. So there you go. Well done, Warren. There you go. All right. That's it for our news question mark list. A whole hour based on whatever that just was, followed by another hour with our good friends Neil Perryman and John Williams about their new podcast, World of Telly. Joined here, Warren and I are joined by 2 of our oldest, dearest friends in Doctor Who fandom. Some of the first people we met at our first ever Gallifrey 1 in 2009. Of course, famous for Tachyon TV at the time, but are back in the podcasting game again with the wonderful World of Telly. I'll introduce them in order of appearance. I don't know. Neil Perryman. Hello, Neil.
Hello.
And John Williams. Hello, John.
Hiya, how you doing?
Not bad. So World of Telly is a new podcast-ish. You've got like 6 episodes in. It's a new podcast. Like it's been 3 months now, I think, basically. But describe what World of Telly is to those who have yet to hear it, and why you decided after this many years to get back into the podcasting game.
Well, World of Telly is basically each episode is a deep dive into a random TV program. The idea is that John and I are going to watch every single TV program ever made in no particular order. So that's the basic premise. And like I said, it's about 40 minutes to an hour, and we go into depth about the production of a program and the reception to the program and what the audience saw the program, and hopefully maybe turn people on to programs they're not aware of or haven't seen before. That's one of the ideas.
Yeah, I think we try. The thing we're trying to do is, regardless of the sort of program, in a way, we try and be positive about it. We go into it with an open mind, because some of the programs we cover, obviously, if we're covering every single program ever made, not all of them are of the highest quality. But we go in there looking at them as if there's something said, and that's Neil. says it occurred to me sometimes hearing you on talking about it on Radio Free Skaro, actually, the way that the streaming world is kind of frustrating place to be at the moment with streaming TV. If you find something you really like, you generally have to wait about 2 years for the next 8 episodes to come out or whatever it is.
If they do.
There's a lot of it. And I just think sometimes it's useful in this program if we do point people back to the fact that there are pretty much readily available material from the past that is actually much more diverting and interesting than you might think. So if we can, but also I think we just try and talk about it in an interesting way that is often hopefully quite funny as well. But it's trying to be as wide ranging as possible and not really. Even though I've just said that, we do cover more recent programs as well. Or intend to.
You did Andor for one. That was great.
Yeah. Was that a we got to get the ratings up here sort of thing? We have to appeal to someone who's under 40. Was that the thinking of going to Andor?
No, not really. The main reason was, and this is the same with virtually everything I suggest, is I just want to know what John thinks of it. I just wanted to listen to John tell me what he thought of Andor, and that was really what it was down to. It wasn't chasing. If we were chasing the audience, then we wouldn't be doing "Don't Drink the Water."
Right.
You got to tap into that nascent fandom. Come on.
I mean, our next episode is a very obscure film called Artemis 81. If we were chasing ratings, we would be doing another Star Wars series or something like that.
Yeah.
And also, I probably wouldn't have watched Andor. Though actually you'd piqued my interest in it, Stephen and Warren, you've been talking about it on the show. But I'd not watched any of the other Star Wars spin-offs. And as I mentioned in that podcast, I'm not particularly interested in it. But Neil basically said, we're going to do it, so you've got to watch it. And I'm glad I did, because I really enjoyed it.
It just felt to me that it was a modern Edge of Darkness in the sense it was that good. It felt like it fitted into the sort of thing that we were talking about, which was quality TV. And then we did Don't Drink the Water. There's a real format's a bit nebulous.
There's a real cognitive dissonance with Andor because you're watching it going, is this Star Wars? Because it seems too good to be Star Wars. And I love Star Wars, don't get me wrong, but it just doesn't seem like it fits until you realize it does.
Yeah. It's a brilliant program.
It's great. Yeah.
It really is. It had the unfortunate timing to go out when Series 2 of Doctor Who went out as well. Yeah. And so it was
chalk and cheese,
it captured my attention probably more so than Doctor Who, but we're not here to talk about Doctor Who.
No, don't mention it.
Because don't mention the war. I mean, Neil, I do feel like the format of the show is Neil Perryman asks esteemed television historian John Williams about every show ever made, because you are feeding John the questions and John goes on.
Keep doing it.
Well, it just all comes back to when I first met John, really, which was about 20 years ago, and Doctor Who, which we're not allowed to talk about, had just come back, and we were at a convention in Stockton upon Tees called Dimensions, I think it was called, and I think I knew John, or had heard about John, from a mutual friend called Damon.
Right.
And he introduced me to John, and literally the first words out of John's mouth was, "Have you ever seen Moonbase 3?" And then proceeded to regale me with stories about all these programs that I'd heard of but never seen, like Gangsters, Artemis 81, Don't Drink the Water, Yes, My Dear, and I would be enthralled by John's tales of how crazy these programs sounded. And that was my intention of trying to recapture that feeling in a podcast. And that's where World of Telly comes from.
Mm-hmm. And as you were asking, Stephen, the reason that this came about, I mean, apart from that, I wish we could say it was a super kind of plan that we had, that we thought about for a long while. But actually, Neil just sent me an email saying, "Do you fancy doing a podcast?" And I said, yes. It was really as simple as that. And before we knew where we were, it was pretty much up and running. But but I think it's interesting because part of the choices that we're making now is because we just started. It's the stuff that, that to an extent, one of us knows quite a lot about. I think the kind of challenges are going to come later when we're going to be doing very kind of long form series with many, many, many episodes that one of us might not have seen. I mean, an example, I don't think it's given too much away to say that we'd quite like to do Farscape, but I haven't seen Farscape. And Neil tells me there's about 100 episodes or something like that. It's going to take a while.
And
so yeah,
Babylon 5 as well. I can't wait to hear what you think about Babylon 5.
You've ever seen Babylon 5, John?
I haven't. But then when Neil used to say to me, you should watch Babylon 5, but then he'd say things like, don't watch the first series because that's not very good. And actually thinking about it, don't watch the second series because that's not very good either. Maybe you should start with the third, but about half of those aren't particularly great. And I was thinking, what am I supposed to do?
This is what stalls me every time I try.
That's so true.
Mm-hmm. Well, why'd you start? I mean, Moonbase 3 is tangentially connected to Doctor Who. It was a show from 1973 produced by Barry Letts and Terrence Dicks while they were making season 11 of Doctor Who. Is because that was the first show that you heard John mention way back at Stockton-upon-Tees. Is that why you started the podcast?
Very vivid memories of John talking about Moonbase 5 being staffed by Brazilians, and I just didn't believe him. I just thought this sounds ridiculous. And then I bought the DVD, and of course they are staffed by Brazilians. And I just wanted to. I mean, I was doing a podcast called Perfect Night In, which was where a guest would share their perfect night of TV. It was a bit like Desert Island Discs, but TV. And I was enjoying doing that. And but the problem was that getting regular guests was becoming really difficult. A few guests mucked me about and fell through, and it became a real pain. I wanted to produce something much more regular, and I thought John would be the perfect guest to have on every week, so to speak. So that's where that came from.
And I have a dangerous obsession with Moonbase 3, so it was always going to be a good one to do because I've been vaguely addicted to that program for a very long while because it fascinates me in lots of different ways. But no, the thing I'd been for the first time because I've not been doing anything really to do with either writing or any podcasting. But someone got in touch by a series of things, and I ended up doing a piece for the Blu-ray release of Brimstone and Treacle. The Dennis Potter, the film version of Dennis Potter thing. And I did that DVD extra, Blu-ray extra. And I thought, yeah, actually, this is quite a good thing to do. You have that feeling that you have actually some knowledge it'd be good to kind of impart. And it was coincidental, I think, that Neil just happened to send that email at the right time. So it felt like a good thing to do. And it's fun. There's obviously a danger that the internet is not really clamoring for two guys in their 50s. To do a podcast
right.
talking about old stuff, but in the end I just thought, what the hell, I think we've got some, I think it's just good to shed some light on some old programs, and even the old programs that aren't necessarily good have got interesting things about them, and that shine a light on things that were happening in the broadcasting industry at the time. And there's some fairly wacky stories to tell about some of the stuff that was going on in the industry over different periods of time.
Well, like for instance, you mentioned in the Edge of Darkness episode that Mel Gibson, of all people, was a huge fan of 80s UK TV. And I'm like, well, I never knew that. What the hell's going on here? I guess all the worst people have one redeemable quality.
For better or worse, because obviously the film version of Edge of Darkness is absolutely terrible. And he wears a terrible wig in the film version of Singing Detective as well, which is not as bad. But yeah, he was like the patron saint of British TV.
What an odd person to be that.
Yes.
Well, how do you decide then on which is going to be next? Do you randomize it? Do you sort of think, okay, let's do this one. I'm feeling in the mood for this one. How do you go about that?
Well, we just did the first conversation we had. I said we're doing Moonbase 3 first because that was like the inception for the whole thing, was getting John to talk about Brazilian moon bases.
Right.
And then after that, I recommended maybe half a dozen. John recommended half a dozen, and we voted on the ones that we thought were doable. And then the ones that are a bit longer, like Babylon 5, Farscape, they're on the back burner. They're there, just waiting for the right time to do them. But it's going to be a long lead into those programs because John's going to have to watch 110 episodes of Babylon 5.
Right. So you don't pick and choose. Like, let's watch an example of this, one from season 1 and one from season 3 or something like that.
Well, that's probably what we'll end up doing. Yeah. Most of the stuff that we've done so far has been fairly self-contained. I think the longest thing that we've talked about is probably Andor, and that's what 24
episodes.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah.
But John was watching them anyway, so it wasn't really it wasn't a problem. So the other programs that we've done so far have been, 6 episodes, Edge of Darkness. I mean, Mystery Science Theatre we also did is got hundreds of episodes, but there's not really a story arc that you have to follow. You can just jump in and dip in.
Right.
So that's sort of dictating a little bit, like programs that we haven't seen before or aren't very familiar with. There's a bit of lead time. We need to watch them all and then research it as well. So we're we're starting with stuff we know quite well to begin with.
Yeah, and I mean, we're gonna have to take that approach to some things. I mean, when we get around to doing Crossroads, for example, or Coronation Street, there's
no, you have to watch the whole run.
No, we're not gonna have to. I mean, I've watched an unhealthy amount of Crossroads and Coronation Street, so to an extent, but it's how you cover it. It's what you're choosing to do for those kind of things as well. But Crown Court as well, of course, it's quite long.
We'll have to pick just specific episodes. Like, for example, if we did Columbo, we'd probably choose 2 or 3 cases to fixate on, rather than talking scattershot about all of them.
And most old stuff's self-contained anyway, comparatively speaking, so it's a little easier.
Yes. Yeah.
And I mean, the Andor thing was interesting just because of your personal histories, I think, with Star Wars as well. But also, as time goes on, as a person who's interested in TV history, that's what I love about this podcast. It's just sort of like it's much more fascinating to look back, at what the environment was when they were making shows like Don't Drink the Water and Yes, My Dear and everything else like that. I mean, you're both sort of historians. Is that sort of what's, it's easier and more fascinating to look at a completed product sort of thing?
Yeah, I think I'm just interested in talking about things that aren't really talked about that much on the internet. I mean, there aren't many podcasts that have 20-minute discussions about the ITV regions, for example.
Which was
this is going to be one. Yeah.
Pure gold. I was walking outside listening to you guys, listening to World of Telly, and you started going on about regional television, and I was like fist pumping, and people were looking at me. I'm like, oh, yeah. If I explained, you wouldn't understand. I barely do.
Is there a shortened version you can get, a potted version of regional British television that you can give us right here? John's eyes just...
It's your time to shine, John.
That was the potted version. Yeah.
I mean, I tried to do a potted version on that Don't Drink the Water one. I mean, basically, it came about when ITV started in 1955. They decided that it couldn't be London-centric like the BBC was. And they decided in the end that there would be a company representing each region. And so the country was split up into certain regions. So the North, Midlands, London, and the southeast or southern areas. And
Scotland,
the North was
Ireland,
Scotland as well. There was a vast area initially that Granada covered, the company called Granada, which covered the North, and later that became Yorkshire, separated off and became Yorkshire TV. So what they did was they had a franchise round, people put in bids to become those companies, and but it was complicated by the fact that some of them were split franchises. So, for instance, like in the North, Granada would have the weekdays, and a company called ABC would just program for the weekend, and similarly, ATV covered the Midlands weekdays, but then they'd move. They'd do London in the weekends. So it's funny because at the time, and so what you got was different. Say there were 8 or 9 regional stations that were ITV as a mass. They'd show different programs. Sometimes they'd align the programs, and that would be what you'd call networked. So everybody in any part of the country would be seeing the same program on ITV, but most of the time, actually, that wasn't the case. And so you'd see a TV listings in like your daily newspaper, which would say Granada, ATV, London, or Rediffusion was one of the early London stations, and they'd be showing largely different programs. And the other big thing, which we didn't talk about in Don't Drink the Water, was that most of the programs were made by the big 5, as they were called, of those regional stations. Because the smaller companies, like one company was called Westwood, which was like, Cornwall, Devon, Southwest.
Right.
And they had no real kind of facilities to make lots of programs. So they were dependent on the big 5. But as you can imagine, the politics of that became incredibly complicated because they were nearly all run by various impresarios. So you had Lou Grade, the famous Lou Grade, who ran ITV Midlands and ATV Midlands and ATV in London at the weekends, would make loads of programs under his other company called ITC, like the programs like The Persuaders and all of those. And they were made really with the US as a target market. And though the people who ran ITV, the Independent Television Authority, would basically look very disapprovingly at this, because basically you are supposed to serve your region, and the region that Lou Grade served was Los Angeles. So it was.
Thank God, though, eh? Thank God.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. But of course, in the Midlands kind of regional news coverage was absolutely terrible, and eventually it became largely West Midlands, because that's where I'm from, and that's where Neil's from. I'm from the East Midlands, Neil's from the West. The news was all skewed towards Birmingham, and nothing ever seemed to happen in Nottingham, even though it obviously did. So and Lou Grade, but the problem was it was known that the ITV was known as a license to print money. That was a famous phrase that was used, and they really coined it in, and so it became quite a sensitive subject. And of course, they were accused of dumbing down. The BBC was absolutely hammered. When the channel first started, the BBC's ratings kind of completely plummeted because they'd previously had a monopoly and got very self-satisfied with it. And so, but then come towards the end of the 60s, they all had to rebid because the franchises came to an end. Lots of companies, you'd have this thing where the companies would just lose out, and that company would effectively cease to exist. And a new company came along, like London Weekend Television. So it was a volatile thing. And Lou Grade was a good example of, he hated London Weekend Television so much, he just used to refuse to show some of their programmes. And so that caused problems, because he did, and he also took dislike to various people. So he refused to put David Frost programmes on. There's an interviewer called Russell Harty who he refused to have on anything that Russell Harty was in. He would not show in the ATV region.
That's awesome.
So it was mad. It was mad. Yeah, I think I was saying before we started that if you were brought up in that time, each one of those regions had its own ident. And when you watch the program made by another region, this ident would come up, and it was just what you were used to. But then you try and explain to anyone under 40 in the UK, and they just don't. It's a bit like, a good example is, another thing that was mad was that the Radio Times used to only be able to have BBC programs in it. Mm-hmm. And the TV Times had the ITV programs in it, and no magazine could come out and have all of those listings in. It was against the law to do that.
Wow.
It was literally, so you had to buy the Radio Times and the TV Times.
Yeah.
And so this was what the kind of market was like. There were lots of really insane things going on, but it seems mad now, but that's what the kind of, and actually I know people who are real TV enthusiasts who, if a sitcom is on, I mean, even from a frame of it, they can tell whether it's Thames or LWT because of just the nature. They almost get to know the cameras that were used to make these programs.
Is that a transferable skill?
That used to be in Canada. You would see 16 mil film, and every Canadian show looked exactly the same, and you're like, that's Canadian, because it just looked poorly lit, and it had the same film grade, because I think they had only one processing facility.
I think there's a Thames camera that's got pixel out for about 3 years during the 70s, and you can tell what it is exactly. So, and they were very different. The thing is, there was a real difference in quality. LWT sitcoms, as we've talked about, were generally seen as being horribly vulgar. And really sort of crude, and then you get a very different characteristic when you see either a Granada sitcom or a Thames sitcom. There's a big difference, and it's actually quite important. The other thing, though, of course, is it's quite funny, I think, on a podcast, if Neil says to me, so how did Don't Drink the Water come about? And I start in 1955 when the program was made in 1974, and I started. Well, they can only really answer that by explaining the entire independent television structure. It's quite funny, I think.
If I can inject a personal note here, you can tell, Stephen and I have this history of you can tell a thing, because we used to work for Teletoon, which is like the cartoon network for Canada. And we had like a little bug with a little smiley guy on like the lower right corner. And everybody was supposed to make it jitter to keep the kids happy. Nobody did. Except one person. So if you see anything from Teletoon sourced on YouTube, Duckman, for instance, or whatever else, and you see that thing move, I could tell you who did that.
Who was working
in 1990, whatever.
Yeah, in the days
that's the kind of granular nonsense that we're talking about here.
They were before. Yeah, I one of my hobbies nowadays is there's several YouTube channels which have old British television shows on them, and sometimes I wish they wouldn't have the Granada or Thames TV or something on the front, because I want to guess. I want to guess who made this. And unfortunately, spoilers usually happen. But sometimes there aren't, and I go, this can't be a BBC thing, and then I find out it's from Pebble Mill in Birmingham. So I'm right. These are the things I remember on a recent podcast, John, you were singing the praises of Pebble Mill and Birmingham doing stuff in the 1970s.
Well, if you'll get more of that on the next one that we're doing that's coming out next Thursday, because there was a guy called David Rose who was the first producer of Z-Cars, who then became effectively head of Pebble Mill for drama, English regional drama at Pebble Mill, and he was just an amazing guy. I was saying, without giving away some of the content of the thing, he used to get, audience reaction ratings, and they in those days they were aiming for like 68 or something like that. They'd be aiming for as a kind of a good score, and most people would be happy if they got that. David Rose was actively made uneasy if the programs did well in that rating, in that scoring, because he was thinking, hang on a minute, are we we're supposed to be making kind of challenging programs. Yeah. Not everybody's going to like them. And he just gave so many new writers their first chance. And it was because he was in Birmingham. Mm-hmm. And he took that job deliberately because he didn't want the powers that be at Television Centre, the execs breathing down his neck. He was out of sight, out of mind. And he used to do pretty much what he liked. And it was just a wonderful time for that. And that's why when you hear... If you see at the end Pebble Mill of a drama from the 70s, it will be David Rose, and it will generally be something absolutely out of the ordinary, like Gangsters, for example, that kind of thing.
And the program we're doing next that he produced got a score of 43, so he's on,
Wow. So that's the sweet spot for him. Well,
I was very happy.
Tying this as best I can into classic Doctor Who, was he... I mean, Horror Fang Rock, because of various production timetable shifting, was shot in Birmingham. Was that related to any what he was doing there? I thought we could shoot this one in Birmingham because they're doing great work there, or vice versa. How would that work? Was there any connection at all?
I mean, I would say that would just be a logistical thing.
Okay,
I think the Pebble Mill facility was available for everyone. And everyone at the BBC, and I think in that case it wouldn't have been anything to do with David Rose. It would just been, we've got a problem at TV Centre, so therefore we need to do it at Pebble Mill. But the thing that was difficult about Fang Rock, I think, was that it was a much smaller studio. I mean, the great thing that David Rose he did a thing called Second City Firsts, which was Birmingham's the second largest city in the UK, and the first were largely 30-minute plays that were for new playwrights. Or new people to TV. So even Ian McEwan, the novelist, did a short piece for that. And they were made in those studios, which were small and kind of perfect for those kind of things. But the reason they weren't used more often. I mean, Rose was very keen on doing film and location as well. Yeah. Partly because that's what he wanted to do, but also because of the fact that facilities weren't particularly great. But no, it was. It's very much seen. People talk about golden age, but that Birmingham in the 70s for the BBC was a pretty amazing place to be. I think because you could get away with a lot and put some stuff out there which would never have been cleared if there'd have been someone in an office 2 floors up from you in Television Centre. You'd have got caught out.
Mm-hmm. I don't know when you're going to get to this show, and there's a lot of episodes, obviously. So I don't know if either or both of you can help fill me in, but I need to know about how episodes of Crown Court worked. Crown Court was like a legal show from the 1970s, which usually took 3-part episodes basically. They played out like there were actual court cases, but there was an actual jury filled with the public. And so like I need to know about this because I've stumbled on a lot of these episodes to spot Doctor Who actors recently, and if you could fill me in and the listeners by
they're clamoring for it. Come on.
What's amazing about Crown Court to me is that they missed a trick in the sense that if they were making Crown Court today, that audience reaction, that real life jury decision would form much more of a part of the show. Whereas back then it was barely even mentioned, John, was it? I don't think.
No, it's sorry, carry on, Neil.
I think did they say in the opening narration sometimes that it's a real jury?
They certainly did at the start. It started in about 1972. The thing about the only person in the jury who's not a member of the public is the foreman because he had to speak, and therefore they had to be a member of Equity, so they couldn't be a member of the public. But the the first thing about it, it's one of those things that I think it had some really good writers on it. Writers who needed the work, but they worked pretty well. But They needed the work. There were 3 half hours to fill or 3 25 minutes to fill every week. And the reason that Crown Court came around was because of the fact that up until 1972, the broadcasting companies were legally not allowed to fill the afternoon schedules with certain types of material. They could do news and they could do the odd magazine show, but they couldn't do drama. And basically, the law changed in 72. So the big regions I was just talking about, Granada did Crown Court.
Yeah.
And ATV did something called General Hospital, no relation to the American one,
right?
Called General Hospital, which is basically like effectively a new version of Emergency Ward 10, which was a very successful soap opera from a few years before. Thames did several series. They're the ones that never seem to stick. They did a thing called Harriet's Back in Town, which had William Russell in.
Oh.
And then you had something called Mark Personal with Stephanie Beacham in. They never really took. They never took off as a really good thing. And Yorkshire hit the jackpot with Emmerdale Farm.
Mm-hmm. Which is still around.
And it's interesting because Emmerdale Farm obviously moved from daytime eventually to an all the year round soap and was very successful and still is to a large extent. It's still going. General Hospital did really well and actually transferred into hour-long episodes in the evening for a while, as did briefly Crown Court. Crown Court actually became a sort of 50-minute long episode for a brief period because it was seen as being so popular. And it was, but Crown Court used to be a thing that's for people my age, it's indelibly associated with being off school ill.
Pretending to be ill.
Or pretending to be ill.
It's like The Price is Right here in North America.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what it is here. Yeah.
Exactly. It's true that I certainly have feigned illness to find out what the verdict was in Crown Court. And if you say it to anybody, what drink do you associate with Crown Court? It will be this drink we have called Lucozade.
Oh, yes. Okay.
Lucozade, which in those days used to come in a bottle that had a wrapping of orange cellophane around it. And it was seen as being a pop that was legit because it somehow had magical healing powers.
The Canada Dry has that here.
If you did that kind of, Mum, I've got a funny tummy, I need to stay home and watch the verdict from Crown Court. And she'd go to the chemist because the chemist sold them and buy you a bottle of Lucozade. So, but also, of course, you'd also get repeats in the afternoon of really quite hardcore drama series.
All right.
So you'd watch Crown Court and then you'd move on to Public Eye or The Sandbaggers or things like that. So being off school was even sweeter than usual in those days, that's for sure. It certainly made me the man I am, that's for sure.
So there was an actual jury then of the public that were sitting there throughout the recording of the whole episodes, and they would actually legitimately decide on these cases.
Yeah, but I don't think they sat in a room for hours deliberating. I think they literally just had to say guilty or not guilty, and that was it.
It was funny as well because, as you say now it would be the deliberation of that jury, wouldn't it? It would be all about that. But what was great about it was that sometimes it was a great vehicle for writers who, some of them were quite radical writers. There was some quite people who, like Roy Batters. No, he was the director, but some of the people who maybe had fallen foul at the BBC of the person who was from MI5 who sat in TV Centre putting a symbol against someone who was not allowed to be employed because they were on the MI5 blacklist. Some of those people would then need to write further things, and they get gigs writing Crown Court, and they'd invariably write a Crown Court about a socialist firebrand agitator who'd been accused of some crime that he was saying was actually fitted up by the state or something. So you got this incredible canvas that anybody could do a Crown Court. They're often really good, very well performed. But then sometimes, because of this jury, this audience of people, the general public, used to get incredibly mad verdicts that didn't play any kind of bear any relation. It was like a cut and dried case would suddenly, oh no, not guilty. And it was like, what? How did that happen? So it added a weird bit of jeopardy to the whole thing, which is quite good.
And then they just went right to credits. That's the thing. Like they never really dwelled on the verdict any. Yeah. Sorry, Neil. You're saying.
The other good thing about. Oh, sorry, Neil. Go.
I was just going to. Crown Court is unique in the sense that it has 2 incredible theme tunes, not 1, 2.
That's true.
And I think that's disturbing because I was just about to say exactly the same thing. It's the ultimate. It's the ultimate trivia question. Yes, it's it's Janacek's Sinfonietta to start with, I believe. And then it's something called Distant Shores, which was the B-side of Simon Park's orchestra's song Eye Level, which was the theme tune to Van der Valk. It's got to number 1 in the UK. Those were the days when TV themes used to get to number 1 in the charts. Imagine that.
Oh,
we must return.
There's an episode of Crown Court featuring some terrorists, and the terrorists are called the KLF. There's a fact for you.
Is that a coincidence?
Nicholas Young's in that one.
Oh, Nicholas who, sorry?
From Tomorrow People. Nicholas Young?
Okay.
Nicholas Young, yeah.
Tomorrow People.
He's a member of the KLF, yeah. I don't know if it's a coincidence or not.
I mean, the Crown Court ran for about 12 years. It was a really sort of, successful show. And, just seen as a quality show. And suddenly, it's a big deal that for me, that whole period, because you suddenly got lots of shows that are actually loads better than you would imagine they might be for a daytime show. And, Emmerdale Farm, when it started, was this program about a clash between the older generation and the younger generation who wanted to go into organic farming. Yeah. And so there was this big kind of, and the returning character was a novelist. He'd become a novelist and was the sort of, this father died. And it was and it had Louise Jameson in as well. She was the first person murdered in Emmerdale Farm, Louise Jameson's character.
Spoilers.
And no, again, when it came out on DVD, the first couple of series, because it wasn't all the year round in those days, it's a quality program. Now, loads of them were good. It was a really good time, and again, as I say, great for being off sick from school.
Mm-hmm. One thing I loved that you dived into was American stuff like The Fantastic Journey, which I have the vaguest possible recollection of probably not even flipping past, going on the analog dial and clicking past. I mean, I vaguely remember that happening, but then you go into all the history of ABC, and I didn't know any of that stuff. Yeah, like how badly they were doing at the time.
Yeah, it's a very obscure program in the sense that people remember Fantastic Journey, but no one can remember anything specific about it. But yeah, again, John is a fount of knowledge, not just in the ITV regions, but overseas as well. So yeah, we try and give a bit of a background to the production history of the program as much as we can, as well as how it was received by the audience and obviously the program itself. But yeah, Fantastic Journey. I did not enjoy that one at all.
It's more the kind of. And there were some. The thing is, there were some. The BBC and ITV, to an extent, used to show a huge amount of American programming back in those days. And there was a slot on BBC Two, the 9 p.m. slot on BBC Two, that had all these great American comedies. The ones that really took off with things like MASH, Rhoda. Not Mary Tyler Moore Show, because they tried to show that on a Saturday sort of tea time, and I think the BBC just thought, because it had the word show in the title, it was like the Doris Day Show or the Debbie Reynolds Show,
like a variety show or something.
Yeah, and it wasn't like that at all, and so it didn't thrive. If they'd shown it on the BBC Two slot, because everybody was really, and my family, we used to absolutely love all those kind of shows. And I was vaguely fascinated by things like Kojak and those kind of programs and the Rockford Files. So later on, when I kind of got a bit older, I was really interested in network TV, because Britain certainly didn't have the kind of take all the prizes for nuttiness in terms of the way the broadcasting worked, and the networks in America were just the kind of periodic meltdowns and panics they used to have when one of them was doing better than the other, and they just used to be cancelling shows left, right, and centre, and it's just it's just again endlessly fascinating to me about. Again, you can tell, an NBC show, you could tell an ABC show in those days. And the fact that NBC and CBS were desperately trying to copy things like the Bionic Man, a $6 Million Man and the Bionic Woman, and getting it horribly wrong with things like, the Invisible Man and the Gemini Man. The Gemini Man was, like I said on the podcast, even as a small child, I realised that was terrible. It was a terrible program. One of the first times I remember actually thinking, God, this is really bad.
For all our waxing on about how much better TV was back then compared to streaming, blah, 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 there was a lot of crap that we just forget because it was crap.
Yeah.
Oh, God, yeah.
The colander of history has sifted out a lot of the stuff that we don't feel like watching anymore. I find it fascinating. I mean, American shows, even up into like the late 90s, early 2000s, like, say, Star Trek The Next Generation, did 26 50-minute episodes a year. Yeah. That's more per capita per season than William Hartnell Doctor Who. like time-wise. And like the archive television was such a churn of like, how do you make, I still don't know how you couldn't do that today. You would make 8 episodes of Star Trek and you'd wait 3 more years and you get another 8 episodes. And back then they were just churning these things out, you know?
Well, there was more of a churning mentality at the time too.
And when it was like that, it didn't matter if there was a bad episode because there was another good one around the corner.
Yeah.
Whereas these days, you've got to make every one of those 8 episodes count. You can't have a duff episode. You can't take risks. You can't experiment. Because if you do, you run the risk of losing half your running time.
Yeah. And the other thing that was interesting, and I keep meaning to look into it in a bit more detail. The BBC clearly used to go into deals with almost like they were sort of saying, we'll take, not just this show that we want. If you want a show, you have to take these other ones as well that go along with it. So my memory of being a kid was that so many of the series that were taken by ITV or the BBC just basically ended after like 8 or 9 episodes. And you realise, and sometimes you might even know through the newspaper that they've been cancelled in America. And yet you were showing this sort of basically a dead end, time limited program which didn't have a proper ending, like Logan's Run and things like that came over. And so it was really quite frustrating if you got into a program and then you suddenly discovered that, oh, I see, right, okay, the reason they're showing this in August is because it's filling a gap in the schedule and it's just going nowhere.
It's like watching Netflix today, isn't it?
Yeah, well, actually, it's quite simple.
Yeah, that's why it worries me that Netflix will get Doctor Who, because if Netflix get Doctor Who, it's dead in 2 years. Yeah, absolutely.
You get your one and then your other one, and then your the renewal cancel agreement. Basically, you get to wait one more season and precisely one more season, and that's
it needs to be Amazon, because Amazon just don't care about quality. They just
see. My theory is it should be the opposite. It should be Apple TV, because they'll pour an insane amount of money at it, and not very many people will watch it, and that's perfect. That's the way Doctor Who should be. No, watched by no one, doing crazy stuff.
The Netflix thing is interesting because Netflix are normally extremely careful to make sure that they own the property, aren't they?
Yeah.
Because when I've forgotten the name, terrible blackout on that, but the BBC show I May Destroy You, which was a really good show, Netflix offered, because they basically just give them a huge amount of money up front and say, we own it now. And she refused to do it. But I don't quite know
Michaela
how.
Cole.
Yeah. She refused to do it and moved to another company because of that, because she didn't want to give it up in that way, even though the money was insane that they were offering. And I don't quite know where Doctor Who would fit in to the Netflix model in that. I don't know what other shows, because obviously they showed some Marvel stuff, didn't they, in the early days before?
Yes.
Marvel started streaming and then everything got pulled back. But I don't know how that would work now.
I think Amazon would be the way to go, because they usually, produce something, then get the back catalog, whereas Netflix might get the back catalog, find out it's doing well, and then do a half-hearted remake like Full House or Gilmore Girls or something, or Arrested Development. That's kind of their model when it comes to existing properties, I find.
Although, given the reaction to Amazon getting their hands on James Bond, nobody's too thrilled about that either. Well, they don't strike me as terribly innovative.
Well, I think that might have changed slightly now that they've announced a director.
Well, that's true, yes.
And he's a good director.
And he is a good director. I can't argue with that.
So maybe they are going to do the right thing.
Well, we'll see.
You mentioned Doctor Who, which we're not talking about, of course, but you will eventually, as the last episode of World of Telly, when you are both in your 80s,
in an old people's home.
we'll be finally covering Doctor Who. I mean, I don't want to even get there, because how do you pick and choose? There are literally a billion television series out there. I imagine there's a few to get to before you start really grasping at straws.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's narrowing it down is the problem. We're trying to open it out to suggestions from listeners. So if you've got something that you desperately want us to cover, like the Sandbaggers,
I went completely to type and suggested the Sandbaggers.
Absolutely.
But we will be doing some programs that are adjacent to Doctor Who, shall we say, now and again. I mean, I want to do Class, the program that no one remembers.
Interesting. We have to spend this money for season of Doctor Who before it goes away. Basically, I feel like it's just like we got the money, we have to spend it. Let's make a season of a spinoff that will never go anywhere. I don't know.
The thing I remember most about Glass is Edward Russell overhyping it. That is my number one memory of Glass. More than that, I watched all of them.
Yeah,
I don't think I've seen any of them.
Oh, really? Oh, wow.
Saw the first one, I think.
Wow. Yeah, the announcement, I think, is probably what, because people says, oh, stand by, it's going to come. Oh, maybe not. Okay, it's coming later tonight. Like, they couldn't decide on when to announce this. And I think finally they decided at 11:15 on a Friday night, we could finally announce that there's a Doctor Who spinoff. It was the most scattershot announcement of a show I've ever heard of.
Wow. I think with regard... Sorry,
I was just saying, back then there was so much Doctor Who, it didn't really matter, did it, that it failed? No one really said it was the end of the world. Mm-hmm. There was so much Doctor Who, but if that happened now, it would be a completely different story.
Well, and it may yet in a few months. We'll see. Yeah. More between land and sea.
Yeah.
I think with regard to Doctor Who, one of the things that wasn't done deliberately, but it's just partly because of obviously our background being Who fans, is that you'll notice that Doctor Who is mentioned in every podcast.
Every single
that we've done, every single one. Yeah. And that's partly because we are who we are, and it's quite difficult to kind of disentangle that kind of stuff. But also, Doctor Who, as we know, is kind of, it's been there all the way through the developments in broadcasting that we're talking about, and it's a very useful kind of point of comparison.
It is a form of time travel. It really is.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah,
it is. So it's I would find it. We didn't say at the start we'll mention Doctor Who in every podcast, but it's just sort of happened, and I can't see how we won't really, because it's never irrelevant. It's always got a relevancy there. So that's the reason why we can comfortably leave it till last.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Mark Harris is sort of on a few panels now that I've seen him on, has basically said like you could watch Quatermass and Doctor Who and be up to speed on literally every single production technique and style and era in television history, from live TV, from Quatermass to, and people say, oh, Doctor Who looks so cheap and this and shot in videotape. And then, when you're like you two or me on YouTube watching stuff like this is just how British TV was made in those days.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's always been a bit of a bugbear, because if you watch Genesis of the Daleks, the drama series that were on immediately after it, like, I don't know, Duchess of Duke Street or something like that, those kind of programs of that type, they're the same. They're made in virtually the same studios, either Studio One or Studio, whichever the ones they happen to be in. They're using the same people. That's why when Toby Haydock used to get annoyed about scenery wobbling in Doctor Who, there's millions of bits of scenery wobbling in those other shows as well.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It wasn't seen as being that level. Everybody knew what they were watching. Mm-hmm. And it's of a piece. That's why you can extrapolate from Doctor Who. You can see an episode of Genesis of Daleks and say quite comfortably, most of the BBC Two and BBC One programs being made in that year look like that.
Mm-hmm. And for us, that was part of the appeal, because we didn't get that. We would have either a sitcom, which is just very flatly shot, or you had stuff on film, a lot more stuff on film, and this was just completely different the way to us in like the 80s.
Well, yeah, I remember reading a book, I can't remember where now recently, but it was like in the early days, it was sort of seen like film stuff was sort of seen as kind of like lurid and seamy and stuff, and like the actual proper television was stuff that looked like it was shot live and on videotape and everything. Like, there was such a disconnect between this is the way I thought as a kid growing up. I thought the original Star Trek looked like cheesy B movies because it was shot on this Technicolor film world that I just thought was just unconvincing, whereas I was drawn to the relative cheapness of Doctor Who on videotape.
Well, you're wrong in the first part and right in the second part.
Yeah.
Well, you get to Star Trek. Is that going to be on your list as well?
Oh, yeah. Which one? Yeah.
Yeah. Which one?
It's all on the list.
Yeah.
Everything's on the list.
Mm. I mean, you did hint at the next one. Do you have ideas for the next few episodes in your heads or in the can already, or?
Not in the can, but they're all lined up. Yeah. Well, the next episode's in the can. That's about Artemis 8-1, and then after that, we're doing a program called Killer Net.
Oh.
Which was like a thriller from the 1990s that mid-90s, around the time that the internet started to become a thing. So
I guess that was exactly the time period. I can even see this like green grid in my head. Killer net.
I can tell you it's even worse than that. It's quite something. It's bizarrely it's by Linda LaPlante.
Yes,
who did Prime Suspect and various things like that. And suffice to say, it has a devilish CD-ROM involved in it.
Of course it does.
That is quite malign. And it's got Linda's attempts to adopt the current, the internet speak of the time.
Yeah.
I think she spammed all over him is a line from it. I think.
I'm heading to YouTube right after this to check this out.
Oh, wow.
But we also want to do topical programs as well. So we're doing Threads, for example.
Oh, nice. Nice.
Which I've only gotten 20 minutes into Threads.
Oh.
The bombing happens. The grandmother is like, having renal issues, and I'm like, this is too sad. I can't get any further than that. And apparently, that's just the cherry on the sundae.
That's the tip of the iceberg. The second
I couldn't
voice,
do it.
The second voice of K9 dies frozen to death on a park bench in his own wee. It's pretty grim.
Maybe by the time I'm dead, I've watched the entirety of Threads, but it's going to take me that long to do it.
They're remaking it, aren't they? That's one of the reasons we're going to tackle it. The news has come out. They're remaking it.
Just what the world needs, a remade Threads.
All the programs that needs to be remade.
It's by the people who did Adolescence, who created quite a talking point in British culture. So and
Adolescence was one we thought about doing actually, because of course it caused such a buzz. But the fact is, I've got a kind of lot to say about that in terms of what TV used to be able to do. You got stuff like that going out on ITV in peak time on a Sunday. Yeah. And because they were more daring, they were less terrified of what kind of happens, and they had the resource and they had the things to do that, and they had the guts. And now it has to be a massive behemoth like Netflix, where it's the only place that you can do that, and that seems to be something that's really badly missing.
And instead of Mel Gibson, it's Brad Pitt.
Yeah,
he produced it.
Yeah, Brad Pitt produced it. That's right. So, talking of topicality, talking of topicality, though, I don't think I've ever seen anything quite as topical as Andor. When we were actually recording the podcast, literally the news that day was straight out of the Gorman cycle
Massacre.
Of kind of activity in there. It was just absolutely so on the nose. It was almost excruciating to talk about.
Yeah.
Looking forward to the single take remake of Threads, shot in one complete 90-minute take.
I think it's not harrowing enough. That's the problem.
With Stephen Graham, with Stephen Graham dying frozen to death on a park bench in his own wee. Coming to Netflix in 2027.
Don't threaten me with a good time.
Oh boy, I tell you, chaps, it's not only is it good to have you back in the podcasting game with such a fascinating podcast, but after a decade or so, it's good to have you back on Radio Free Skaro again.
We were such good guests. They invited us back 10 years later.
10 years later. Looking forward to the Jack Thorne retrospective in 10 years' time for the Jack Thorne era of Doctor Who that's to come. I'm just guessing, but you never know. He writes everything these days.
Who's Jack Thorne?
I was going to ask the same
thing. He writes so many things. You'll act surprised when he's announced as the next showrunner.
It's going to be J. Michael Straczynski, isn't it?
Oh, sure it is. Yeah, you bet.
Yes, the same.
All of a sudden, all these Doctor Who fans will be running to watch their Babylon 5 collections.
I think he's too young myself.
That's true. That's true. That's true. The podcast
boggles the mind, though, doesn't it? JMS.
It does. I know.
Let's talk about that for half an hour.
Oh God,
I've got a lot to say.
Oh, perhaps on the next episode of World of Telly.
10 years from now.
10 years from now when they do Babylon 5. World of Telly is the podcast. It's been great talking to you chaps again.
Bless you.
And that's it. That's it for this here podcast. So in the meantime and in between time, I am Stephen in Edmonton.
Warren in Vancouver.
Neil in Durham.
John in Whitley Bay.
So long for now.